With the deadline rapidly approaching, teams across the league are feeling the pressure to make some crucial moves. This happens every year though. Some team enters the season excited and optimistic about what their roster can do. They've made big moves in the offseason to improve their roster and maybe, just maybe, make a push into another echelon of the NBA. But as the season goes on and more games are played, they quickly realize that these moves aren't as impactful as they once believed. It's no different this year as we have a few teams in this very position. With the clock ticking, these teams find themselves at an intriguing point of the year, evaluating their current roster strengths and weaknesses. The trade deadline presents a golden opportunity to address those shortcomings and possibly bolster their chances of success. The pressure is on any front office as they scramble to negotiate deals, as they seek the missing pieces that can elevate their team's performance to new heights. Now, it is a couple of teams who are on the watch list this year, and a good amount of these teams sit in the Eastern Conference. Now, the first team on this list is one whose franchise has just seemed lost ever since they made a huge run in the playoffs just 3 years ago, where they beat a potential contender and were toe-to-toe with the NBA champions that season. That team is none other than the Atlanta Hawks, who have severely underperformed this season. The Atlanta Hawks possess one of the most formidable offenses in the NBA and boast Trae Young as well, who is one of the premier offensive players in the entire world. And although the on-court chemistry between Trae Young and DeJounte Murray may not always be flawless, they managed to make it work, with both players capable of leading the offense on any given night. And additionally, Bogdan Bogdanovic is a strong contender for the Sixth Man of the Year award, as well as Jalen Johnson having a pretty significant breakout year this year. However, it isn't hard to see why the Hawks have been struggling once you start to dig a little deeper. The defense has been abysmal this season, particularly since Jalen Johnson's injury. According to some stats from Clean the Glass, the Hawks rank 25th in points allowed per 100 possessions. And on top of that, they are also 28th in effective field goal percentage allowed. These numbers are alarmingly poor, and they have worsened considerably since Jalen Johnson went out due to injury. Now, the Hawks have a ton of talented players on their roster, that is not a question, but they haven't fit well together, which has led to them being one of the most disappointing teams in the NBA as they sit in the 10th place in the Eastern Conference. This has led them to be a team to watch as the deadline comes closer and closer. The Hawks have committed to keeping Trae Young and Jalen Johnson as they look at them as their core, but the rest of this roster is available to anyone with the right package, including star guard DeJounte Murray, who has had several trade rumors swirling around him all season long, and there are several other players that could also be on the move to provide flexibility in building a new look roster around Young and Johnson, with Quinn Snyder at the helm. Now, when it comes to realistic trade targets, the Hawks don't really have too many of those. The Hawks could pursue Quinton Grimes, the 23-year-old guard for the New York Knicks, as Grimes is rumored to be available at the deadline, and Atlanta is among the interested teams. He's having a decent season as he's averaging 7.2 points per game with 1.9 rebounds and 1.1 assists. He could provide a pretty significant off-ball boost for the Hawks. Outside of him, the only name we've heard in exchange for DeJounte is D'Angelo Russell, but that seems like a long shot at this point, and it's hard to see where the Hawks can go from now if they want to build around Trae Young and push themselves to contention. As of right now, it isn't that many players available to help them do that, and they don't really have the packages for the players who could push them over the edge. But one thing about the NBA, every year we find a star who is disgruntled, and even though we might not have thought they could have been moved, they end up being moved. Now, the next NBA team is one that once dominated the NBA, but now they find themselves as one of the NBA's bottom feeders. They are currently in an identity crisis. The once proud dynasty is getting old, expensive, and fragile. And this team is none other than the Golden State Warriors, who are just desperate to make the playoffs. Now, the Warriors are just desperate to make the playoffs, and this is a pretty sad statement to say here in the Steph Curry era. Now, the Warriors can still salvage Curry's remaining elite years, but the process requires immediate attention. The Warriors have struggled to maintain any type of consistency this season, mostly due to key players underperforming, a handful of injuries, and the suspension of veteran forward Draymond Green. So, what move can Golden State make to provide a mid-season spark and stay afloat in the playoff race? Well, to be honest, it isn't many moves. Unless they want to come up off of their young guys, the Warriors find themselves stuck in NBA hell right now. Many of the moves that they need to make will have to be done in the offseason when they have more time and options available. In the offseason, the Warriors could target free agents who complement their existing core. They have a strong culture and a winning history, which could attract players looking to contend for championships. But at this point in the season, while it might be tempting to trade away their young talent, the Warriors, in my opinion, should choose to focus on developing their young players forward. This would involve giving them more playing time and opportunity to grow, which should pay off in the long run, especially considering that they might not make the playoffs this year. Now, the next team on this list is none other than the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, I talked about them more in detail in a video I made a couple weeks ago, and since then, nothing has changed. Actually, one could argue that things have gotten worse. The Lakers need to make moves ASAP. With the way LeBron has been acting, they're due for some big changes very soon. Now, players like DeJounte Murray and Bruce Brown could help the Lakers right away, but it's just hard to believe that anyone currently on the market can turn them into legitimate title contenders, even after last season's surprise run to the Western Conference Finals. I mean, think about it. We're talking about a team that has, by and large, had its two best players healthy all season, and still ranks average or worse on both sides of the floor. This team needs wholesale fixes. One probably includes a coaching change to be meaningful contenders in the Western Conference. And that's something that just isn't feasible at the trade deadline and will probably have to wait to the offseason, similar to the Golden State Warriors. Now, the final team on this list is one that we are all too familiar with, and this team is none other than the Chicago Bulls. Now, it kind of feels unfair to apply the word pressure to the Bulls, as this is an organization whose ambitions seem not to extend beyond make the play-in without paying a luxury tax. If they maintain their current trajectory, they're headed for years of relevance, or should I say more years of relevance. However, the pressure shouldn't be external. I mean, this roster is nice. You have key pieces. Lonzo Ball looks pretty good. Zach LaVine's injured right now, but he was balling, he was on the court, and Kobe White looks like the future. So the pressure seems to be more internal, but it isn't. The pressure is all external, and almost everyone outside Chicago seems to understand that the Bulls should be trying to recoup assets for players like DeMar DeRozan and Alex Caruso, while keeping an eye on that 2025 first-round pick and potentially adding the sort of centerpiece that they lack. The Bulls might not see it that way, but this deadline is a pretty critical inflection point. However, with reports coming out about how they are going to continue to try to go all in and compete, it's hard to believe that this will happen. Now, while the Bulls have a desire to continue competing and going all in for immediate success, it's important to consider the long-term implications of such a strategy. By holding on to their current roster and disregarding the opportunity to accumulate assets, they risk prolonging their current state of mediocrity and limiting their ability to make significant improvements in the future. But ultimately, the decision lies within the Bulls' front office, and their approach will shape the trajectory of this franchise. It remains to be seen if they come up off these assets and properly utilize the talent that they have. But that's something they're going to have to wait until a trade deadline to see. Now, of course, these aren't the only teams that need to be active at the deadline. Teams like the Suns, the Nets, and even the Kings should look to make moves to improve their roster. The Nets specifically are kind of like the Bulls, as they have a plethora of talent sitting on their roster that should be moved to help that franchise begin its rebuild. However, they're kind of similar to the Bulls. They're trying to go all in, and they think that they can compete. But with the way the Nets are constructed, I don't think that's possible. When it comes to the Suns and the Kings, they could really use some wing defenders. The Kings specifically need help on the defensive side of the ball, a significant amount. But these needs aren't as evident and necessary as the teams I mentioned earlier. The trade deadline is a make or break for those teams above, and it's the difference between them going all the way in June or sitting on the couch in May. But as always, these are just my opinions. Let me know how you guys feel down below in the comments, and if you enjoy it, make sure you leave a like and subscribe. But that's all I have for now though, and until next time, peace.